I'm Eileen Galuli, and as the Executive Director of the Society of Fellows and Heyman Center for the Humanities, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the world premiere of Mortality Mansions, a song cycle by the U.S. Poet Laureate Donald Hall and Grammy Award-winning composer and librettist Herschel Garfein. It's performed this evening by the pianist Dmitri and by the tenor Michael Slattery, with readings by novelist Richard Ford, poet Jean Valentine, and Dr. Rita Charon. Thank you all so much for your participation. I'm both institutionally and personally very grateful. Also performing this evening up on that screen in a few minutes will be Donald Hall, one of America's preeminent poets. Mr. Hall will be joining us courtesy of the Proctor Academy in Andover, New Hampshire. And we'd like to express our gratitude to the faculty and the administration of the Proctor Academy for graciously lending their facility and their help in making this happen. As some of you know, the Heyman Center for the Humanities is the central site for humanities research and outreach at Columbia University. It aims to foster new ideas, offering those situated throughout the university, especially in the humanities and the human sciences, the opportunity to think together and to pursue collaborative projects. It also presents lectures, workshops, conferences, and, as in the case this evening, performances free of charge to the New York City public. A performance such as this one goes far beyond the scope of most of our offerings, and to say that this event would not have been possible but for the time, energy, and talent of the following people and organizations does not begin to convey how deeply indebted I am to Martha Guth and to Sparks and Wiry Cries, to Rita Charon and her program in narrative medicine, to Tina Kant and to Barnard College, including especially all the people at events management at Barnard, and to my exceptionally hardworking colleagues at the Society of Fellows and Heyman Center for the Humanities, Emily Bloom, Joella Jones, and Kay Zhang. And of course to Herschel Garfein, who first approached me with the idea of a Barnard Columbia performance of Mortality Mansions, and who ended up being its producer as well as its composer. As you'll soon hear, one of the distinctions of Mortality Mansions is the keen sense it offers of two artists from different generations recognizing something vital in each other's work. There is a quality of playfulness and wit, and also of sudden gravity in this work, a quality that's summed up very nicely in the title of the song cycle. So here is Mortality Mansions. Herschel, you're up? Yeah.
So we're running things a little informally here, but not as informally as we first tried this program out in Don's very small town in New Hampshire 6 months ago. And that's sort of the inspiration for this whole evening. So I can guarantee you there are going to be some awkward moments when one video or another doesn't quite work, and I'm not going to be disturbed by them. I hope you won't be either. So welcome. Thank you very much.
When the young husband picked up his friend's pretty wife in the taxi 1 block from her townhouse for their first lunch together in a hotel dining room with a room key in his pocket, midtown traffic gridlocked and was abruptly still. For one moment before klaxons started honking, a prophetic voice spoke in his mind's ear despite his pulses erotic thudding. The misery you undertake this afternoon will accompany you to the ends of your lives. She knew what she did when she agreed to this lunch, although she will not admit it. And you've constructed your playlist 1,000 times. Cocktails, an omelet, wine, the revelation of a room key, the elevator rising as the penis elevates, the skin flushed, the door fumbled at, the handbag dropped, the first kiss with open mouths, nakedness, swoon, thrust and catch, endorphins followed by endearments, a brief nap, another fit, restoration of clothes, arrangements for another encounter, the taxi back, and the furtive kiss of goodbye. Then, by turn, tears, treachery, anger, betrayal, marriages and houses destroyed, small children abandoned and inconsolable, their foursquare estates disestablished forever, the unreadable advocates, the wretchedness of passion outworn, anguished nights sleepless in a bare room, whiskey, meth, cocaine, no love, essayed in loneliness with miserable strangers that come with miserable strangers that comforts nothing but skin. Hours with sons and daughters studious always to maintain distrust, the daily desire to die, and the daily agony of the requirement to survive until only the quarrel endures. Prophecy stopped. Traffic started.
When the young husband picked up his friend's pretty wife in the taxi 1 block from a townhouse, for their first lunch together in a hotel dining room, with a room key in his pocket. Midtown traffic gridlocked and was abruptly still. For one moment before klaxons started honking, a prophetic voice spoke in his mind's ear, despite his poses, erotic flooding. The misery you undertake this afternoon will accompany you to the ends of your lives. She knew what she did when she agreed to this lunch, although she will not admit it. And you've constructed your playlet 1,000 times. Cocktails enough, wine, the revelation of a room key, the elevator rising as the penis elevates, the skin flushed, the door fumbled, and the handbag dropped. The first kiss with open mouth, nakedness spoon thrust and catch, endorphins followed by endearments, a brief nap, another fit, restoration of clothes, arrangements for another encounter, the taxi back, and the furtive kiss of the goodbye. And by turn, tears, treachery, anger, betrayal, marriages and houses destroyed, small children abandoned and inconsolable, their foursquare estates disestablished forever, the unreadable advocates, the wretchedness of passion outworn, anguished nights, sleepless in a bare room, whiskey, meth, cocaine, new love, essaying loneliness, miserable strangers, comfort nothing but skin. Hours with sons
Ladies and gentlemen, Donald Hall. Can you hear us, Don?
When I was young,
Don? Don, hang on one sec. We want to talk to you a little bit about that poem before we go on, okay?
Okay.
I'm on a kind of lifelong mission from about 6 months ago till the end of my life to convince you that much of the poetry you write is extremely musical, despite all of your protests to the contrary. And so I want to start by talking a little bit about this poem, When the Young Husband. I often say that the true test of a rhythmical writer is when you can hear 16th notes in their words. For example, when I was a lad, I served a term as an office boy in an attorney's firm. I washed the windows and I swept the floor and I polished up the handle on the big front door. Now that's lyrics by Gilbert, one of the greatest lyricists of all time. Now, I think you yield nothing to him in the sense of being able to do an omelet, cocktails, wine, the revelation, cocktails and omelet, wine, the revelation of a room key, when the young husband picked up his friend's pretty wife in a taxi 1 block from the townhouse. And you're not, of course, intentionally writing for operetta. So just wondering if you'll concede that something like that must have been running through your head when you wrote those lines.
I'm not sure I was thinking operetta, but I'm always thinking of the sound of my poems. Not the musical sound, the sound of word, townhouse. It's those 2 diphthongs in a row. So the long words say, and then there are quick ones and slow ones. And with a poem like this, you use the line break as well to organize with them. People talk about the music of poetry. It's a bad metaphor. Music is music, and poetry is a sound. For me, sound is my doorway into a poem. But it's not music. I know it. It's the sound of these diphthongs and consonants, assonants. Very limited compared to music, but to me, utterly important.
Okay.
I love it.
I want to confess that I am very new to the Donald Hall fan club. I only got to know Don's work about 4 years ago when some friends of mine suggested that I read your poetry. And one of them was a former student of yours from Michigan. And being a lazy 21st century American, the first thing I did was to look up Wikipedia for you, which was a big mistake. Wiki anything is a big mistake these days. And one of the first things it said was, it was this kind of slightly dismissive thing about you being a bucolic poet in the tradition of Robert Frost. And I admit I closed that page and then I didn't really think about reading your stuff until I picked up White Apples and The Taste of Stone, which was an incredible collection. And I started reading it and I thought, well, what really appeals to me here are your poems about sex. I thought that you write brilliantly about sex, and that became a big theme in the poems of yours that I chose to do. And certainly Robert Frost, I like Robert Frost, but no one would ever accuse him of being a great writer about sex. Are you okay? Are you okay with that? You're okay with that characterization? And there's an interesting thing in this first poem, which is that this prophetic voice that this guy hears in his head, it's a big kind of put on, isn't it? Because ultimately, the dread that he imagines from this affair, first of all, doesn't stop him for one instant from going ahead and having the affair. But also, there was a time when you added a little, a sort of a postlude to this poem in which you kind of castigated yourself for having kind of, all these convenient fantasies about, the tortures you were going to undergo for infidelity, or not you, but the protagonist, let's say. And then, you know, what I realized from your postlude was that is part of what is the turn-on for the guy. In a way, seeing all the dread consequences that might occur is part of what makes him eager to go ahead with the thing. Is that fair?
I'm sure. I don't know exactly what I was thinking of at the moment. It was a number of years ago. But I do like in those poems, I would like to set something forward and then immediately contradict with another poem. It's my pleasure.
Right, right. We're now going to hear you read When I Was Young.
When I was young. When I was young and sexual, I looked forward to a cool Olympian age for release from my obsession. Ho, ho, ho. At 60, one's desire sustains my pulse, not to mention my groin, as much as it ever did, if not quite so often. When I gaze at your bottom as you bend toward me, or at your breasts, or at your face with its helmet of sensuous hair, or at your eyes proposing the text of our next encounter, my attention departs from history, baseball, food, poetry, and deathless fame. I thus pull back the blanket, slide off our blue jeans, assume familiar positions, and celebrate lust in Mortality Mansions.
When I was young and sexual, I looked forward to a cool Olympian age for release from my obsessions. At 60, the body's one desire sustains my pulse, not to mention my groin, as much as it ever did, if not quite so often. When I gaze at your bottom as you bend gardening, or at your breasts, or at your face, with its helmet of sensuous hair, or at your eyes proposing the text of our next encounter. My attention departs from history, baseball, food, poetry, and deathless fame. Let us pull back the blanket, slide off our blue jeans, assume familiar positions, and
there's an article in a new magazine, poetry magazine, called The Music of Poetry. I'm so tired of that cliche. Poetry is the sound of a poem by itself, said aloud, is all important, but don't call it the music. It's a dead metaphor. Music is music, and the poetry sound is mouth sound, and it's very sensual, very erotic, really. It has its own music, but nowadays when I read, my whole life when I read most of the poetry that's published, what's wrong with it is, or where I first find something wrong with it, I say, when you read it aloud, it doesn't make any noise.
Uh-huh.
Music makes a noise, that's its point, yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right. I know that in response to your poems, I felt that they were so alive with those kinds of sounds, and also you have that special way of treating vowels.
Vowels, diphthongs, especially.
There's
Wow.
that great line in Woolworths where you're listing things that you see in the store, and only one word is out of place at the end of a line, and that's green. Green,
You can
garden
hold on
chairs.
to it.
you know.
Yeah.
And
the GG, consonants matter too.
Consonants, of course.
Green garden.
Of course.
It happens in here.
This is Woolworths. I thought of revising the name and calling it Walmart, but I'd rather go back to the old 5 and 10, which is how I began. Woolworths. My whole life has led me here. Daisies bare and red, hairnets and motor oil, Barbie dolls, green garden chairs, and 41 brands of deodorant. 300 years ago, I was hedging and ditching in Devon. I lacked freedom of worship and freedom to trade molasses or rum or slaves or molasses. Thus, I will sail to Massachusetts to will the kingdom of heaven on earth. The side of a hill swung open. It was Woolworths. I followed this vision to Boston.
Daisies made out of resin
It's my great pleasure to introduce a truly wonderful American writer whose novels are favorites of mine, and I have to believe favorites of a lot of us in this room. Richard Ford has the knack of writing with incredible detail and compassion in service to stories that say a lot about people and places, but do so in a very graceful way, a very unforced way. I find his books very touching, very funny, and he proves to me that what's funny in great writing is flashes of truth, of recognition that you weren't prepared for. He and Donald Hall have been friends for a very long time. I've known him for about half an hour. But even in just trading banal emails with him, trying to arrange the details of this evening, I found myself wanting to try to write like him, to be very, very clear and very, very honest. Richard Ford.
Thank you, Herschel, very much, and such an honor to get to be here with my colleagues, and thank you all for coming. It's true, Donald and I have known each other a long time, since 1971, which is a long time, in case you haven't noticed. I think it's fair to say that if it weren't for Donald Hall in my life, I wouldn't have a life. He knows that, of course. And I know he's thinking to himself now, I can read this poem better than Richard can. And so I've tried my best, Donald, to make this sound with my southern accent as much like Robert Penn Warren as possible. This is The Green Shelf. Driving back from the market, bags of groceries beside me, I saw on a lawn the body of a gray-haired man twisted beside his paramour. A woman twisted her hands above him, mouth wide with a cry. She bent close to him, straightened, bent, straightened, and an ambulance stopped at the curb. I drove past them slowly with helpers, kneeled by the man. Over the stretcher, the lawnmower continued to throb, and absently the hand of the old woman caressed the shuddering handle. Back, I put the soup cans in order on the green shelves. Pickles, canned milk, peas, basil, tarragon.
pickles, canned milk, peas, basil, and tarragon.
So Don, we're going to hear the song Fete now, okay?
Festival lights go on in villages throughout the province, from Tow Harbor past the Elbow Lakes to Eyelid Hill. When you touch me,
Well, we damn sure wouldn't have wanted to miss that. That was great. Well done. The young watch us. The young girls look up as we walk past the line at the movie and go back to examining their fingernails. Their boyfriends are combing their hair and chew gum as if they meant to insult us. Today, we made love all day. I look at you. You are smiling at the sidewalk, dear wrinkled face.
the next two songs go together, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about a very significant and very tragic but important period in Don's life. He taught for many years at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, and while he was there, he met, and by the way, if I get anything wrong here, Don, please correct me, okay? If I get any details wrong. He met a student, a poetry student there named Jane Kenyon, who was later, of course, to become one of our most significant poets. And they fell in love and they married in 1972. And 3 years later, his grandmother died, and he bought the farmhouse that she had lived in this small town in Wilmot, New Hampshire, near where Don is right now. I believe that it was mostly at Jane's instigation that Don decided to give up teaching and to move with her to this farmhouse where they would both pursue their writing. And of course, both of their careers flourished at the time. He even published a volume of poetry called The Happy Man, which tells you something. And they created this wonderful life together, both an artistic and a personal life together. And then in 1989, Don was diagnosed with colon cancer. And he had an operation or two, and it even spread to his liver, so that he had very, very little chance of survival. So at the time, one has to imagine that, I know that Jane took care of him, and the idea was that was going to be, that he was close to the end of his life. And then miraculously, after 4 years, he went into remission. And then several years after that, it was discovered that Jane Kenyon, she was diagnosed with leukemia, and she died 15 months later. And throughout that whole period, Don continued to write. And that body of writing, both poetry and some essays that he wrote at the time, have figured very prominently in the cultural life of our country. And so that brings me to the introduction of our next guest. Dr. Rita Charon is here, and she is the director of the program in narrative medicine at Columbia University. The short story, her official resume would take me too long to read, but here's the story. She was a general internist at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital, and she started to realize the importance of storytelling and listening to stories in medicine, especially in the very complex interactions between doctors and patients. And so she went back to school, got a PhD in English literature, and thereafter, I guess I would say she began her true life's work. And this is how I would put it. She recognized that great doctors will have to have insights into humanity quite as deep as the insights of great writers and great artists. And so she inaugurated the entire discipline of narrative medicine in order to further that aim. So it's with great pleasure that I introduce Dr. Rita Charon.
Thank you so much for letting us sit together and meet together and listen to these works, spoken and sung. These are the works, these are the things that we wish we all could perceive, but the gift of perception is given to those who can best represent them. And so those of us who can't quite do that, listen as hard as we can and read as closely as we can so as to take in that which they see, so that you, novelists and poets and musicians, are our seers. You know that hospitals are mortality mansions. And so this kind of sight, this sharp, deep sight is necessary in those mortality mansions. And so it became a way of helping doctors, nurses, social workers to see what was in front of them by bringing them the the deep, clear sight of our artists. So that's what we do. It is not at all a surprise that our medical students, and this is not just at Columbia, read a lot of Donald Hall, and they read Jane Kenyon, because those are the voices that we have found most completely bring to these young, healthy kids who are trying to be doctors the truths, the what happens. And so we read with them, we make them read poems like Ship Pounding, which is one of Donald's poems that talks very nakedly about the futility of what we do. And it's because of the art of the writing that these little students who have no idea what's going to happen to them understand. They understand. The speaker in the poem says after the protagonist has been through still another round of chemotherapy, that he's going to bring his wife home. He says, bald as Michael Jordan, home to my dog and day, you know? And so this gives our students a way to know the savagery and the beauty of what's in front of them. We read Jane Kenyon's poem, The Sick Wife, just as a way to help them to imagine that which happens within illness. And what it is that he teaches us is the necessity of the metaphor and the meter. He won't let us call it music, but I'm going to say that too, in order to know what lives as well as dies in these mortality mansions. I'm going to read you one paragraph from his essay called Out the Window, which is about the farmhouse that we just heard Herschel talking about, where he lives. And the reason we bring this to our students is so that along the way they learn a little something about ongoingness. Whatever the season, I watch the barn. I see it through this snow in January, and in August I will gaze at the trailing vines of roses on a trellis against the vertical boards. I watch at the height of summer and when the darkness comes early in November. From my chair, I look at the west side, a gorgeous amber laved by the setting sun, as rich to the eye as the darkening sweet of bees' honey. The unpainted boards are dark at the bottom and rise toward the top in a brownish yellow that holds light the longest. I study the angles of roof, a geometry of tilting, symmetrical, and importantly asymmetrical, endlessly losing and recapturing itself. Over 80 years, it has changed from a working barn to a barn for looking at. Down the road, I see the ghosts of elm trees, which met overhead when Route 4 was the Grafton Turnpike. 150 years transformed them from green shoots to blighted bark. Out the window, I watch a white landscape that turns pale green, dark green, yellow and red, brown under bare branches, until snow falls again. And I'll now read a poem that is central in the Mortality Mansion. The title is "Dying is Simple," she said. Dying is simple, she said. What's worst is the separation. When she no longer spoke, they lay alone together, touching, and she fixed on him her beautiful, enormous, round, brown eyes, shining, unblinking, and passionate with love and dread.
Thank you, Dr. Charon. What you say and how you read. I wrote a book by James Laureate called Life Work, and about years after she died, I wrote a poem called Death Work, which I will read now. Wake when dog whimpers, quick finger inject insulin, glue teeth in, smoke cigarette, shudder and fret, feed old dog, write syllabic on self-pity, get Boston Globe, drink coffee, eat bagel, read at nervous speed, smoke cigarette, never forget, measure oneself against Job. Drive out afternoon, walk dog, don't write, turn off light, smoke cigarette, watching the sunset, wait for the fucking moon. Nuke lasagna, pace and curse, for tolerance, for solitude support, drink Taylor's port, smoke cigarette, sleep, sweat, nightmare until dog whimpers.
Now we actually do need the projector for a film clip. The clips that you see are from a visit I made to Don I think it was about 10 days ago. And I talked to him about a few things in his farmhouse in New Hampshire. And I guess this is a time to mention that once I'd written a number of these poems, I got in touch with him and I said, can I come and visit you and talk to you about these things? And he said, sure, but my limit is an hour. He said, after that, I'm too tired. I don't like to talk for more than an hour. And you'll see that he's not going to talk for much more than an hour tonight. At any rate, so it was a 5.5-hour drive from New York, but I got in my car and I went up and I spent a glorious hour with him. And then, when an hour was up, he said, okay, thanks, that was great. And it's a very small town, so I grabbed a sandwich at the gas station, which actually makes a very good sandwich. And I got back in the car and drove back to New York, and it was, a 12-hour or so round trip. And I've done it many times since then, and I've never resented an hour spent in the car. It's always been just a wonderful to visit with him. So on one of these visits, the last one, about a week ago, we were talking about various things, and I asked him about this idea of why he kept writing during the whole time of Jane's illness and then her death.
I want to read Donald's poem, Summer Kitchen. Summer Kitchen. In June's high light, she stood at the sink with a glass of wine and listened for the bobolink and crushed garlic in late sunshine. I watched her cooking from my chair. She pressed her lips together, reached for kitchenware, and tasted sauce from her fingertips. It's ready now. Come on, she said. You light the candle. We ate and talked and went to bed and slept. It was a miracle. Then I'll read a poem that many of you may know as well as Summer Kitchen, Let Evening Come, by Jane Kenyon. Let evening come. Let the light of the late afternoon shine through chinks in the barn, moving up the bales as the sun moves down. Let the cricket take up chafing. I don't know, Don, chaffing? I don't know. Let the cricket take up chaffing as a woman takes up her needles and her yarn. Let evening come. Let dew collect on the hoe abandoned in long grass. Let the stars appear and the moon disclose her silver horn. Let the fox go back to its sandy den. Let the wind die down. Let the shed go black inside. Let evening come. To the bottle in the ditch, to the scoop in the oats, to air in the lung, let evening come. Let it come as it will, and don't be afraid. God does not leave us comfortless, so let evening come.
Thank you, Jean. I'll read Rita Jones. She laid bricks arranged in V's underneath the garden's edge of blossom. After her death, after the freezes of many winters, her bricks rise and dip, undulate by the wellhead. In summer, softened by moss, and in deep June I see preterite, revenant popping, fix, waver, fix, waver, fix.
And now, so that we don't end the concert with a lot of talk, this is our chance to do a little talking. So now's the chance for you to ask questions, especially of Don Hall, but of anybody, any of our guests tonight. And I will relay them to Don, and then we'll end with his magnificent poem, Gold. So, Don, can you hear us?
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Don has a lot of integrity with his words. I wanted to know what he... Don, can you talk about your collaboration with Herschel, and how was it like? How was it for you working with Herschel, and what did you think about what he did with your poems?
I love it. I don't have anything to say which can give a trace of my wisdom about music, because I'm dumb. But I am grateful, and I love this night, and I love listening before, and hearing what he has done. And I love also tonight hearing Dr. Chad and Jean, and I thank you all. And first of all, we thank Herschel. You and I both together. I am running down to Steve a bit now, you're about a trip. It's more than an hour, Herschel.
Okay, we're wrapping it up now.
Okay.
Yes.
I was wondering what Donald's special project was when he was poet laureate, because I know everybody does something.
When you were poet laureate, Don, the question is, were you tasked with a one special project, or were you given free rein, or were you encouraged to do a one special thing, and what was it?
I really had great ambitions when I started being poet laureate, and I disappointed myself. I could not do much. I tried. I could tell you stories about trying and failing. I wanted to start a radio program, various ideas. And I did everything in a poet laureate has to do, and maybe a little more, but not nearly so much as I wanted to. I was a disappointment to myself as poet laureate, and grateful to people, but I don't think I did a great job. Sorry about that.
Yes. Yeah. No, I picked I picked the poems because, well, I've already said that I thought that he wrote remarkably well about sex, and I thought that, and especially, you know, sex as seen by people over 60, and right, and I'm getting very close to that myself, so it was very important to me, and it's not something that, you know, is talked about or mentioned much in our culture, but also the fact that he embraces sexual love in a very unusual way, and you know, I think the reason that I seized on that phrase "Mortality Mansions" was that overall, I think that these poems see love, and especially sexual love, as a kind of hedge against death. And, you know, that's, of course, there can't really be any hedges against death. You can't get away from it. It's inevitable. But I think that he finds a certain kind of, ultimately finds a certain kind of redemption in just having lived according to those, according to that kind of passion. And I really responded to that. So, we did 8 songs last May up in right at that school, the Proctor School, where Don is right now, and then I added 2 more for this world premiere. But I was pleased to see that many of these poems, his latest volume of poetry was the selected poems of Donald Hall, and his publisher told him, choose your favorites and put them into a volume, and that came out actually after I had done my settings, but I was pleased to see that many of the ones that I chose were also favorites of his. Fair to say?
All of mine. Yep.
Okay, good.
Please.
One more, yeah.
Sean, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
This is the second piece of work that you've done that deals with mortality and illness, facing goodbye.
Yeah.
I know that both of your parents are living. Can you talk about your own interest in this subject matter and what has drawn you to this subject matter?
The question was, what drew me to the subject matter of mortality? Yeah, that's true. Well, you're putting me on the spot. Well, this one it's not just about dying, it's also about sex and shopping when time permits, going to Woolworths. So I don't know. I mean, I do think that, you know, if you're going to do something as, in a sense, arcane and as far from the center of culture as to write a song cycle, you might as well take on something big, you know. What's the point of, you know, writing a song cycle about, you know, the thought I had yesterday, you know, or something like that, or, you know, darn, she left me, something like that. So I just, the clarity and the kind of unfussed quality with which Don spoke about these tremendously important things really, really appealed to me. That's, I guess, the best answer I can give. I thought that he dealt with these tremendously important things, and in a way, maybe it's not any coincidence that all the people who are our guests tonight have that same kind of view of, and in their work they have that same kind of simplicity, no BS, really a certain kind of honesty and simplicity in dealing with these momentous issues, which I think ultimately is the way to go. Don, anything you want to say to?
Well, I just remembered that I thanked everybody else but not Richard. I'm delighted that Richard could read my things tonight. And thank you all for writing the music, for playing it, and for coming to this. I've had a very good time sitting here, able to watch and listen as I decay toward my 89th year. I would love to read Gold.
Good. And don't leave after you, yes, and don't leave after you read Gold, okay? Listen, and then we'll come back to you one last time, okay?
Okay, not very long.
No, not very long.
Okay. I'll read Gold. Pale gold of the walls, gold of the centers of daisies, yellow roses pressing of a clear bowl. All day we lay on the bed, my hands stroking the deep gold of your thighs and your back. We slept and woke, entering the golden room together, lay down in it breathing quickly, then slowly again, caressing and dozing, your hands sleepily touching my hair now. We made, in those days, tiny identical rooms inside our bodies, which the men who uncover our graves will find in 1,000 years, shining and whole.
inside our bodies, which the men who uncovered graves will find in 1,000 years.
Okay, Don, have a great night. Wonderful to see you.
Thank you.
All right, I'll see you soon.
Thank you so much. Everything.